Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports, Real GM, front office show. Check out the podcasts. And he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Welcome back, Keith. What's up, man?
Hey, well, a lot for a Monday. Was not how I expected to begin the week.
Yes, alerts all over my phone waking up this morning. Anthony Davis wants out. And you have been a guy, if you follow Keith on Twitter, at Keith Smith NBA, who has really kind of broke down this Anthony Davis and Celtics stuff, because a lot of people just assume, okay, the Celtics have been waiting for this moment. The Lakers have been waiting for this moment. Why is it that the Celtics are not going to be involved this season?
Yeah, the challenge with the Celtics is they already have Kyrie Irving. And when you have two players who have signed a designated rookie extension, which is what Irving and Davis did, kind of informally known as the Rose Rule, because Derrick Rose signed under those terms once upon a time. Those guys you're not allowed to acquire two of those players via trade. Boston obviously did that with Kyrie last year, so they can't do that with Anthony Davis. The minute either one of the players is no longer on that contract, which would mean Kyrie after he opts out at the end of this season, or if he did, there's a couple other options, they could trade him or something like that. But if he opts out, then that restriction is lifted and the Celtics can go ahead and go for Anthony Davis. But this year, very, very unlikely that happens.
Right. So the chances, that people are saying, all right, Boston's going to they've been waiting for this moment and they're going to make their move, and that's going to get them out of the fifth spot and move them closer to the favorites of the East, which, it's been disappointing that they're not in that spot already, is unlikely, if not impossible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just not going to happen right now. And the Celtics, they've gone through some struggles and some ups and downs. It looks like they've more or less maybe turned the corner as of late. They've played some of their better basketball in the last month or so, really since Christmas. But it has not been the season that many envisioned for the Celtics to this point.
Why is that? I mean, I know you follow that team pretty closely. Why have the Celtics been a little clunky?
Yeah, reintegrating Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward that's a challenge. Anytime you bring two new guys who are veteran guys that expect to have the ball back into the fold, it's going to be difficult to do that. You also had the added pressure of having to ask young guys like Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum to take a step back when those young guys got the team within a poor shooting night of a potential NBA Finals appearance. So, it's easy on its face to look at it as we made it that far, add these two guys, we're a Finals team for sure, but that's not really, best laid plans of mice and men. That's not really how it all works out. You got to get in there and let these things develop. And, it took Brad Stevens a long time to find the lineups and roster combinations and the rotations that really made sense for this team. It seems like they've kind of locked into that now, and now things seem to be turning the corner the right direction, but it's taken, a good half a season or so to get there.
Keith, what do you think about the timing of this announcement that AD finally wants out officially? Is this calculated, and do you see any other scenario where he does not end up in a Los Angeles Lakers uniform?
To the first part about the timing, I think it is twofold. I think there's the first piece is I think he's just finally had enough, and it's looking like they're definitely not going to be a playoff team now. Now they have fallen all the way down to 13th in the West. They're 6 games out. It's just not going to happen for them. 3 straight losses, and that's really taken them out of the mix. So I think its timing is it's time. He's ready to speak on it. I think the other part of that is giving the Pelicans that kind of runway to say, hey, even if you don't trade me this year, make your other moves. I think AD is still a loyal guy who, has kind of given everything he can to this franchise and hasn't gone the way he wanted. But I think now he's looking at it as, hey, if you want to make other moves that don't involve me, that's fine, or give you this opportunity to set it up, whether it be the trade deadline or as we head into the summer. As to the Lakers part of your question, I do think that there's a likelihood he's not a Laker. They don't have the best package to offer simply because Boston could beat it. There's a couple other teams if they really wanted to go all in. Toronto, maybe even Philadelphia. If they wanted to go all in, they could probably beat what the Lakers are offering to go get AD. And I think it serves the Pelicans best to wait until you have a full and available market to look at these trade packages from everybody versus rushing right into something with LA that may not be the best offer you can get. So the Lakers, if it's going to happen right now, it's probably going to be the Lakers, but I think the Pelicans are going to wait. This is more likely to go down in the summer than it is, but we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out.
While we're on the topic of superstars being traded or leaving their current roster and team, I want to transition real quick back to Kyrie and Boston Celtics because I want your thoughts on Kyrie's future. I feel like it's been a roller coaster ride this year. 1 month he comes out and announces that he's staying and not going anywhere. The next month, you have Nets fans, I believe it was, chanting Kyrie's leaving. And there's some pressure, I feel like, up there on keeping him, or maybe they don't want to keep him. How do you see that whole dynamic and relationship playing out for the future?
Yeah, they 100% want to keep him, and he continues to give every sign that this is where he wants to be. He said it at the season ticket holder night before the start of the season. He came out, he had kind of given the team a heads up just before the event. I'm going to let everybody know I intend to resign here, and this is where I want to be. He has not moved off that stance, at all. Going into the season, he even filmed that commercial with his dad about wanting to see his number 11 Boston jersey retired by the Celtics. So it would be a pretty big change in direction from Kyrie. And then the team, they've shown no indication to do anything as far as moving on from him. I think they realize to be the championship level team that they want to be, that involves having Kyrie Irving on the team. Otherwise, you're probably just not there. You're probably short of where you need to be. You need that superstar to put you over the top. So I'd expect him still to all parties to see this through the way they plan, for him to re-sign with the Celtics this summer.
Keith Smith is with us here talking a little NBA. And, of course, let's go to Jimmy Butler. What is the feeling about his future in Philadelphia, first off? 5 years, 190 sounds like one of the reasons why he's been upset is because no one else has been willing to give him that. Why would Philadelphia be different?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they're going to be. I think that there's a chance that they're going to say, yeah, there's a reason nobody wants to go there. This is a guy who will be 30 at the start of next season. And that's not, old, but that's, that trend tends to be kind of the cutoff line for where you're more in the back end of your career versus the front end. Now, he should still have, at least 2-3 good years left. He's also got a kind of an increasingly heavy injury history that's been loading up on him here. He's had, some knee issues and leg issues, and now a wrist issue. So you worry about that, and that's going to be the challenge. If you're going to commit 5 years to this guy, you're basically saying we're doing it to get him for the next 2 to 3 years, knowing years 4 and 5 are probably not going to be the best years of that contract, and we may be looking at, quite frankly, a bad deal down the stretch there, versus, you're kind of paying up front for knowing it's going to get bad towards the end.
Keith, how important is this time frame for Elton Brand and the 76ers front office? The deadline's approaching, and there's a lot of signs pointing towards legitimate reasons to not keep Jimmy, as you just outlined some of those. So if that's the case, don't you think that they would be smart for them to make a trade and package him right now to get some assets back before you decide to let him walk, or a deal falling through in the offseason?
You could look at it that way to say, let's put him together with something else and go out and get either younger assets or better assets, better fits for the team right now. But I think the other side of it is they play pretty good with him, and they look like a really good team, when they're all together, and they've got to kind of figure it out between him and Embiid and Simmons. Those moments are kind of flashes versus being permanent things. But I think you look at it as saying, hey, we can really make this thing work. Part of the reason why they made the trade so early in the year was let's get past the bumps in the road, so we're really firing on all cylinders when we get to the playoffs, and we all know what our roles are and what the team is. That's why I think they're being very careful with not rushing him back to action. They're making sure he's really ready to go and ready to play, be a contributor all the way down the stretch. But, if you, for any reason, you feel like we're probably not going to re-sign him, then yeah, your best course of action, of course, is to move on from him and recoup whatever assets you can get. The other piece of business for Philly is they've got to flesh out the roster. They have to get better depth in there. They were able to pull that off last year in the buyout market with Ersan Ilyasova and Marco Bellinelli. If you can pull that kind of deal off again, either at the trade deadline or through buyout, that's obviously where you're looking to go, because as the roster is constituted right now, they just don't have the depth to probably win more than a round, maybe 2 rounds at best in the playoffs, but they're not really a contender because they just don't have the guys behind their starting 5 to get it done.
If the Sixers were to say, you know what, we're not giving Butler 5 years, 190, number one, do you see a scenario where he signs for less than that and stays in Philly, which I think is hard to believe? And number two, do you think there will be a rabid trade market for him in 2 weeks?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part first. I'm not entirely sure that there would be. It's just going to be really hard because anywhere he goes, they're going to face the same exact questions as Philly is facing. With less of a runway to get there, you're going to have to incorporate him in. It's going to be a bumpy situation and figure it out. Jimmy has been one of these guys. He's for a guy who's only about to be 30, he's as cranky as my dad is back home, who's almost 70. And always yelling at the kids and telling them about the ways it needs to be and how everybody needs to be a harder worker. And that gets really tough. He's just a tough guy to kind of have around. So I think one of the challenges with that is finding the team that's willing to do what Philly did when he was up for Minnesota, which is give back some really good pieces to bring this guy in. As far as signing him, yeah, you might be able to get him to agree to a 3+1 deal where he gets back on the market and then kind of looks at it as, all right, I'm going to have these 2-3 really good years, then I can get back on the market again and get one last contract before this all really goes downhill for me. I'm not sure that Butler is a guy it's 5 years max or nothing, and I think he's going to be realistic, hopefully along with his agency, to say, all right, that's not really there. Let's take the best deal we can get, even if that is a slightly shorter contract, which gets you back out on the market one more time before the end of your career.
So you got Anthony Davis, potentially Jimmy Butler, which I don't think the Sixers are all that interested in moving Butler. But how do you think the Anthony Davis trade request changes this season, if at all? Like, do you see a scenario where he actually does get traded in the season, or is it teams picking the bones and getting Drew Holiday and going that route?
Yeah, I think that second one is a little more likely. It's the hard thing with Anthony Davis, really, and it's not just Anthony Davis. It's the Grizzlies are going through this now with Marc Gasol and Mike Conley. Once a player makes over $20 million a year, you're either looking at you have to take back bad or questionable money in return for that player, or that the acquiring team has to give up 3 or 4 players. And I always like to use the story that I was told by a general manager of, hey, I went and told my guy one time we traded for the superstar. And he's like, I love that guy. What did we give up? I gave up one of your starters and 3 of your key bench guys. And the coach was like, I don't love him that much. He just killed my depth. So that becomes the challenge here as you're trying to pile up contracts to put it together. And that exists as well for Drew Holiday. He makes about $25 million also, like Davis does. But all these other pieces, like Ejuan Moore and Darius Miller, maybe even Julius Randle or Nikola Mirotic, those are all easy to move pieces. You could do that. And you could, because teams are always looking for good, solid point guards. You could still see a team say, we'll go all in. Drew Holiday is now competing with Mike Conley in a lot of ways for these are the best 2 guys on the market at the position, similar age curve, similar injury history in the background. But, let's go all in and get this guy because this guy can push us maybe over the top this year, but also down the line. And if it's a team that's not going to have cap space anyway, there's no reason to not make that trade. So I think Davis saying what he said today or yesterday and it coming out today really sets the Pelicans up to say, all right, let's make our other decisions around the roster and, start moving some of these other pieces out. And if you can get somebody to also bite and eat Solomon Hill's contract, so much the better. That would be, that becomes an even bigger win for New Orleans.
Keith, you brought up Conley, and I think that's an interesting team as well now who finally seems to be breaking that duo up. One of the most unrecognized, underappreciated tandems, I believe, in the NBA in the past 10 years, Conley and Gasol, both now on the trade block. Where do you see those guys potentially winding up when it's all said and done?
Yeah, it's really, really hard again just because of how big their cap numbers are to make a trade for them. Marc Gasol a little easier because he makes less money. And I think, you're going to see some teams really interested in him because I think teams will look at it and say, all right, we're close. Marc Gasol is a guy who can put us over the top. Conley probably a little less so because as you go kind of on the roster of playoff teams or teams that are fighting for playoff spots, not a lot of them need a true, pure point guard. Most of them are pretty well set at that position, and the ones that do, there's almost no reasonable path to matching $30 million in salary that doesn't gut your team. So I think there's a good chance we see Gasol moved by the deadline. I think Conley will get moved, but I think that's probably going to happen when we get into the summer just because it's far more easier and it makes it a little more realistic to find destinations for him at that point.
Keith Smith with us, Yahoo, NBA. The NBA Front Office podcast is available on iTunes and Spotify. Keith, you mentioned the big names, obviously Conley, Anthony Davis, and some others, Gasol. On the trade market, who are some other realistic names that we could possibly see that could help a team like Philadelphia where they're looking for that secondary piece maybe?
Yeah, one of the challenges with this trade market has been so many teams are still in it for the playoffs. So you're seeing teams that there's more buyers than there are sellers right now. One name, though, that continues to come up, he's the guy whenever I'm asked who's most likely to get traded. I think it's Kent Bazemore. I think he is the most likely to get moved from the Atlanta Hawks as a very tradable contract number, fits for a number of teams as a 3-and-D guy on the wing, something teams are always looking for. Though that's a guy you want to focus on. The Sacramento Kings are being extremely active in both looking at, can we move out some of our more questionable money like a Costa Koufis and set things up for us, kind of going forward. So they're a team you want to look at. And I think we're starting to get the sense that the Orlando Magic might be starting to turn the corner towards saying, all right, we've hung in this thing, but it's just not going to happen this year. And that starts to open up trade possibilities for guys like Nikola Vucevic as well as Terrence Ross, who are two expiring contracts, very easily movable money that could really help a number of teams because, again, big man, teams are always looking for those, and Ross, that kind of 3-and-D potential on the wing, another thing teams are always looking for. So those are some of the guys you want to keep an eye on here over the next week and a half or so.
You anticipate the buyout market being plentiful, or should you not put your eggs in that basket?
I actually think the buyout market may be more active than the trade market. Again, on the buyout market, you have all the way until really the end of March to know, all right, who's in this, who's not. And at that point, you're really going to be looking at these guys saying, all right, well, we can move this guy, we can buy out this guy. What happens, or what's happening, I should say, is half the league is poised to have cap space this summer, so nobody wants to mess that up. Nobody wants to take on long-term money that's going to screw up any plans you have in the summer. But in a buyout, you're always bringing a guy in for only the remainder of the regular season. So guys like Robin Lopez, whose number might be a little too hard to move right now, he gets bought out. Somebody's going to snap him up right away. If Bazemore doesn't get traded, the Hawks may buy him out, and somebody will jump all over him. Dwayne Dedman, another guy on the Hawks. You're going to start to see these names really start to pick up, and teams are looking at it and saying, all right, here's where we go. Historically, buyout guys have a fairly minimal impact on what happens the rest of the season. I think we could really see some good quality guys move at that point of the season.
Yeah, it's obviously a big move. It was a big push for Philadelphia last year. And, when you look at their roster, do you think they can be active in the trade market?
Yeah, active in the trade market is really hard because it probably involves moving Wilson Chandler, who's been their starting four-man, or Markelle Fultz, who really you'd be getting rid of him at his absolute lowest value. What they are stuck in right now is their contracts are either really big contracts like Joel Embiid, who's not going to be traded anyway, or they're guys who they just have no interest in moving, like a Ben Simmons or a J.J. Redick. These are guys who, obviously are a big part of why the team is as successful as they are. So that really limits you to Chandler or Fultz as your tradable pieces. Yeah, you could pile together a couple deals like Justin Patton and maybe, Mike Muscala, Landry Shamet, Furkan Korkmaz, but you're talking a fairly minimal impact guy coming back. So their room towards upgrading their roster really comes through the buyout market versus the trade, because then you're just talking signing guys for the rest of the season, which they have the ability to go make happen as soon as they can create some roster spots.
All right. Oladipo's done for the year. Many people thought it was a 5-team race in the East. The Nets have won 6 straight. Is it still a 5-team race? Is it a 4-team race? Where do you put Indiana? Do you believe in Brooklyn?
I believe in Brooklyn to a point, and I still believe in the Pacers to a point, but I now have them both clearly a tier below Milwaukee, Toronto, Philly, and Boston. They're just not going to have the horses to beat those teams, when it really matters. I think Indiana now, they're sitting at third as we go into tonight. I do think that they will eventually drop all the way down into that 5th spot. They've got a 6-game cushion on the Nets for 6th. That's a lot of ground to make up this late in the year, but, Philly's only a game behind them. Boston's only 2.5. I think those two teams will pass Indiana. And then the Nets, I like them. I think they can kind of give a team a little bit of a scare in the first round. They just don't, they don't have that superstar talent to push them over the top to get all the way there.
in the West, is there a number 2? Is it Golden State and then 7 others, or is there some separation between the rest of the pack? I know Denver is 3 games up on Oklahoma City, but are they that much different than the Clippers?
Yeah, it's well, to some extent, it's always Golden State and everybody else, right? It's the Warriors and 29 other teams, never mind the West. But as you look at it, it's really, I think the team we still want to watch out for is the Houston Rockets. They're, now they're starting to get healthy. They're gonna get Clint Capella back. They still have probably another move or 2 in them to flesh out their roster. And they were, again, much like the Celtics in the East, they were one bad shooting night away from knocking off the Warriors last year. They have a path to get there. Their path is a couple games where you hit a whole bunch of 3-pointers, and you win. A game where James Harden scores 50, 60 points, and you win. And now all of a sudden it's a Game 7, which can go either way. And then I do think the Denver Nuggets can be interesting. They're not on the Warriors level. They just don't bring it night to night like the Warriors do. We see Golden State. They just played in Denver a couple weeks ago, and you could see that was almost like one of these, okay, this is cute, you're a fun story, but let's remind everybody who we are. And they blew the Nuggets out in their own building. So the Warriors, they're still a tier ahead of every other team in the NBA. But if you're gonna go looking for another team in the West, I'd still say it's the Houston Rockets.
Keith, what about the Oklahoma City Thunder? Because I've been having this debate over the past couple weeks. Paul George is playing at an MVP level. He's taking that Kevin Durant role. He's not Kevin Durant, but he's taking that role this season. I believe that's why they're having such good success. Dennis Schroeder could potentially win 6th Man of the Year, and they have a good supporting cast, and they're allowing Westbrook to not feel like he has to do everything. I can see the Thunder making it to the Western Conference Finals against the Warriors. What are your thoughts on how legit they really are?
Yeah, I think you can see them making it to the West, and a big part of it is they defend their tails off. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league. They really get out and extend. They played Milwaukee yesterday, and the Bucks have been kind of tearing everybody up on the offensive end. And Oklahoma City defended them all the way from the half-court line and in, and the Bucks just couldn't find that spacing that they're used to getting. They get up and pressure the ball really well. And they're doing all this without Andre Robertson, who's, one of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA when he's healthy. My worry with OKC is in the playoffs, because you're playing the same team 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a 2-week span, they can really build their defensive game plan for you. And my worry is Russell Westbrook has been so inefficient this year, and his shot selection is really bad, that if some team says, all right, we're going to take Paul George away, and we're going to make, we're going to let Russ launch these 30-footers, 20 seconds left in the shot clock and take all these crazy shots, we'll let him do that, and we'll just kind of go from there. So it's going to be tough for them if they run up against one of these better defensive teams that can build a game plan to stop them to score points, and that's always at a premium in the playoffs. So I worry about OKC being able to pull that off.
Luke Walton make it through the year?
We'll see. I think he's going to make it through the year, but I have a hard time seeing him back coaching this team next season. I think even if they make the playoffs, it's going to be one of those kind of convenient excuses of, we didn't win as much as we hoped to, we're going to go a different direction. When I think in reality, we all know he wasn't really this front office's choice, and he wasn't LeBron's guy. So that's probably the real story behind it, but they're going to have a built-in excuse to make a change.
At Keith Smith, NBA, contributor for Yahoo Sports, Real GM, covers the Celtics blog, and also listen to his NBA front office podcast available on iTunes and Spotify. Keith, February 7th, the trade deadline. We'll talk soon, pal.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a busy week and a half.